You may have noticed that sometimes people do not always respond to logic or to reasoning or arguments, and instead they just make fun of you or ignore you or start talking about something else, or they start to speculate that you have ulterior motives, or they sort of attack you on what they think is what they think is your standpoint based on how they view the world. There's a lot of noise here today. Anyway, so basically, and you have probably heard me talk about how sometimes, people do not respond to arguments when I attempt to talk to them. And when it comes to something like kindness or love, I suspect that the same thing is likely to happen if you attempt to reach people with kindness. That even though you try to show kindness to people or compassion, that this will not always work, just like reason will not always work. Now, unlike with attempting to reach people with logic and arguments, it's more difficult to think of examples where kindness doesn't work, or to analyze it properly. So I'm partly making this video to hear your opinions or perhaps your experiences, because I assume that not everyone who watches my content only follows me. I assume most people are familiar with this idea, especially within something like spirituality, that we should promote love, and that there are various teachings on how to make people more loving and how we should spread love and so on. And I suspect, I have only read a few anecdotes here and there, but it seems that this does not always work, because the reason why people are cruel is not just because they are emotionally hurt and thus hostile, but it's also sometimes people are cruel simply because of boredom and other reasons that where kindness will probably not work. And I have speculated that if something like reason or if something like kindness is supposed to work or be more effective, you need to combine it. You have to use both reason and kindness, or some kind of, at least not aggression and hostility, because I don't view kindness, it doesn't have to be overdone, as long as you don't needlessly try to hurt people's feelings, because I see that a lot. Sometimes it can be difficult for people who are naturally pretty friendly, or at least not hostile. People are naturally not hostile, to think that they still need to work a lot on compassion or kindness, and they actually don't, so they overthink it and overanalyze it. It's not like you need to be overly kind and overdo love in a kind of exaggerated way, or kindness in an exaggerated way. But basically, I suspect that you need to combine reason and logic with kindness, or at least not do logic in an aggressive way too much, and at the same time also combine this with authenticity. But I also suspect that authenticity and truthfulness may not work to spread truthfulness, just like kindness, using kindness to people may not spread kindness as we like to think that it does, in the same way that using reason and argument doesn't always help spread reason and argument. Now, it does seem to work to a certain extent, but perhaps if these are all combined, because I can see potential situations where if you're too kind to someone and they start to take you for granted, then revealing how you really feel revealing that they should not push their luck, so to speak, may it may facilitate understanding more. Like, the reason why you are kind is because you have self-control, and they should be aware of that the only reason I'm not reacting hostilely towards you is because I have worked on myself. But if you're not going to learn from this, if you're not going to be kind like I am, or listen to what I say, then perhaps I should reveal, perhaps I should let go of my self-control, so that you can see what I was like, what I am like without this. I don't know. In order to teach people, sometimes you need experiences, and sometimes those experiences has to be a little bit shocking, perhaps. But I am interested in basically hearing what people think about kindness and this issue of love, because ultimately everything is sort of our own responsibility. Even if somebody tells you something using arguments and reason and logic, you still have to think about it yourself and struggle with it in order to make an effort to try to listen and understand what they are trying to say. And the same thing with kindness and authenticity. It's ultimately up to you to work on that, to make yourself more kind. And so, because there is a limit, I also see certain limits to how you can be kind and have that work. Let's say there is a woman, and she has been hurt by men all her life, and so she hates men. And if you are a woman and you show kindness to this woman, it's not going to help her become more forgiving to men, because you're a woman, and it will just make her worldview again seem more like, yeah, it's women who are kind to me, but not men. And the same thing if you're a man. Okay, you're a man and you show this woman an act of kindness, then perhaps she will rethink that perhaps not all men are bad. But then you meet a man who has been hurt by women, and you show him kindness, and it doesn't really help him overcome his hatred of women. So, and there's like a limit, and that's why it's better to really work on trying to make yourself more kind, more than others. And then I guess kindness in the end is something like the final state. It's like where we want to arrive at eventually, but perhaps achieving that may need a lot more, a lot of other things before we can reach that. Sort of like a medical doctor who is trying to heal a person. A medical person does not use health to make a body healthy, but rather it uses a lot of other things in order to reach health. And you could say the same thing is the case with something like kindness. We develop a more kind society, perhaps not just through kindness, but through education, through truth and authenticity, and also teaching things like becoming less attached, less serious about things, and also facilitating a more stable sort of material foundation where people do not where they have somewhere to live and have the basic necessities of life and things like that. And of course this is also relevant to the situation in Sweden right now, with a lot of criminality, and Sweden is considered a very kind and friendly country, and it is, and yet still we have people coming in who have sort of taken this for granted or abused it. And so it seems that kindness cannot overcome something like imitation, the sort of cultural routine that these people have sort of grown up with. And then you have kids in these communities who are coerced almost to become criminals by the older criminal family members and things like that. And so again, this is sort of similar to the situation where where a woman cannot be kind to another woman and make her kind to men, so to speak. You need to have because you have different I don't know, there are many people who view things in categories, and their hatred is based on categories, and thus you need something from specific categories to fix themselves in a way. And so it is very complicated, and again something where simple kindness and peacefulness and friendliness does not always seem to be enough to inspire people to be better. And which brings me to one final thing that I want to touch on in this video, and that is this idea of admiration and basically acting as a role model. If you have like a king or someone who acts as a virtuous man, a role model, then other people will follow him and want to live up to him. But I have discovered that this isn't accurate. It doesn't work. Instead, you will have some people simply be envious, and I don't quite understand envy. It might be something that I have overlooked, because I myself is not a very envious person, and so I don't really understand it. I tend to take for granted that people, unfortunately, I suffer from the same kind of projection that everyone suffers from, that we tend to believe that other people are more like ourselves than we really are. And so I tend to think that because I'm kind of rational, I tend to think that other people will respond to my rational arguments, and when they don't, it's because I don't understand how people are quite. And it's very difficult, I understand that it's not my fault, because I cannot read people's minds, and especially when other people do not speak the truth about themselves, it's kind of difficult to understand. That's why I try to teach or encourage and make almost a teaching out of this idea of that we need to speak the truth about ourselves. And this relates to authenticity and honesty. But yeah, either people seem to become envious, and I guess I simply have to take certain people's word for this, that there is envy in people, and it's a psychological mechanism that I don't quite understand, why people become hostile because they envy, they want what the other person wants or something like that. Again, I'm not sure how to deal with that, or how to understand it. And then there are also people who admire someone, and there is this role model, but instead of trying to live up to this role model, they become like some kind of protector or warrior who kind of attack people who criticize this person, and they attack them in a kind of a very unproductive way, and often they kind of tarnish the image of this person. Because you see this guy, and he seems to be pretty virtuous, but then you have all his followers who are attacking anyone who are criticizing them. It becomes counterproductive. And that too that is a kind of love. They love this person they admire, but the love is not. The love is too partial. It is very easy to confuse love with partiality. And that's why we need to think of love as something other than partiality, as something other than enthusiasm, as something more like self-control, which I have talked about before, something that doesn't come easy, that requires you to change your attitude about things that you normally wouldn't appreciate. And that is what I view as the foundation of kindness or love, this idea that within yourself, even though you may understand that you may need to fight, perhaps even fight against that which you should view with some appreciation or some acceptance or forgiveness. That it's a sad situation that we have to fight, but that's what life is, and life is surprises, and life is. I guess I have to appreciate even that I have to fight this person. And so love is something very personal in a sense. But of course we also need to, I guess there is there has to be some point in also expressing or showing other people kindness in some way also, and not just keep it to ourselves. Like, yeah, secretly I really love this person, but all I show them is cruelness. I don't know, you can't just do that either, but it is a balance. I mean, I don't think there is a one way to sort of navigate the world that works in all situations. I don't think you can only use humor. I don't think you can only use kindness. I don't think you can only use strength and force. You always have to change and adapt and be flexible and creative, because that's how the world is. The world is complicated and consists of many different forces. And so you have to be prepared to deal with each force in its own way, so to speak. So that's what I wanted to say in this video. It was a while since I talked about love or kindness. And again, I am interested in hearing what you think about this idea of kindness, and when you think it works and when you think it doesn't work, and how your own experience on working yourself in developing this aspect of love or kindness or compassion or forgiveness, and how that has worked out, or if you have some kind of anecdote about that, or what you struggle with and so on. And I will talk with you again soon.